Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Angolans vote in an election marking the end of President José Eduardo dos Santos' 38-year reign, with his MPLA party set to retain power despite an economic crisis. Also, as bodies from last week's mudslide in Freetown continue to wash up on the shores of the city, around 500 were killed and hundreds more are still missing. We meet some of those who are struggling to find hope amongst the tragedy. And despite international controversy, South Africa's first online auction of rhino horn opens to bidders. The three-day sell-off has been organised by the owner of the world's largest rhino farm, who says he's doing it for the good of the animals. But first, polling's closed in a parliamentary election that's going to deliver Angola its first new president in almost 4 decades. After the polls, José Eduardo dos Santos will leave office after 38 years on the job. He's the continent's second longest-serving leader. The ruling MPLA party is still expected to win, with its candidate, Defence Minister João Lourenço. Our team in Luanda have been following the day.
The sun is set on this historic election where Angolans have gone to the polls to elect their first new leader in nearly 40 years. The polling stations opened at 7 this morning and the day's gone by with relatively no major incidents reported. Of course, we have heard some stories of voters arriving at a polling station and finding their names not on the list and them having to walk up to 10 kilometers to another polling station to find their names and register there. But Angolans have been upbeat about this election. It's a new time for them. It's an opportunity for them to change and see a new era in Angola. People have been very excited, especially the youth. We've seen election observers saying to us in the last couple of hours that things have gone smoothly. There were more than 1,400 election observers, none from the European Union per se. They abandoned their mission last month when the Angolan government said they were not able to travel to all the parts of the country due to security reasons. There were, however, election observers from the African Union, from SADC, and of course around 200 local election observers as well.
De Bossompier there for us. Now, if Lourenço wins as is expected, questions have been raised as to how much power he may have, given that Eduardo dos Santos will stay on as the head of the MPLA. Although he's leaving the presidency behind, the 74-year-old may still have an influence over decision-making.
After 38 years in power, Angola's President José Eduardo dos Santos is stepping down. His record is mixed. In 2002, he brought peace after a decades-long civil war. Yet, despite its huge oil wealth, Angola remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. More than 2/3 of its population live below the poverty line. Opponents blame rampant corruption and nepotism.
The president basically privatized the state in favor of his family, a few cronies. For these individuals, it's all about having the country's resources at their disposal to have the same lifestyle as the richest people in the world have, with no care for what happens to the people.
Dos Santos may be stepping down. He and his family are likely to retain significant power. Dos Santos will continue as leader of the ruling MPLA party, while his daughter Isabel will stay in charge of Sonangol, the state oil company. Meanwhile, Dos Santos' chosen successor, João Lourenço, has ruled out any major policy changes. Analysts say he's expected to win.
We are going to continue the work begun by our late leader Agostinho Neto, the work which President dos Santos himself continued.
Big challenges await Angola's next president. With a drop in oil prices, the country is going through its worst economic crisis in decades. 20% of the population is unemployed, and the economy is set to grow by 1.2% this year, a long way off the 22% it recorded 10 years ago.
In Libya, the Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for beheading at least 11 people at a checkpoint in the Al Jufra region, 500 kilometers south of Tripoli. Instabilities racked the country since the 2011 revolution, and though IS jihadists were driven out of Sirte last December, they remain active elsewhere. This week, several children whose parents were IS members killed in the battle for Sirte were reunited with relatives in Khartoum. They were repatriated by Sudanese authorities after having been held in Misrata. The death toll in a mudslide in Guinea's risen to 10 after the body of another victim was found on Wednesday. Rescuers have worked through the week in Conakry trying to find survivors after a landfill site collapsed on houses in the Dar es Salaam neighbourhood after a night of torrential rain. There are concerns that shifting rainfall patterns, rampant deforestation and expanding urban populations are increasing the risk of deadly mudslides across West and Central Africa. Well, a week after Freetown was struck by a deadly mudslide in which 500 people were killed, hundreds of people are still missing. Over 120 of the victims were children, and around the same number have been orphaned by the tragedy. One school on the city's outskirts has lost half a dozen pupils, and staff are still unsure about the fate of dozens more.
This is where Sierra Leone's mudslide struck, destroying everything in its path. Among the confirmed victims, 6 students and 2 teachers who attended this school in Pentagon on the outskirts of Freetown. Another 50 children and 2 teachers are still missing.
All the places that you are seeing here, we are houses. We are having a story building, 2-story building.
Anne-Marie founded the Royal King's International School for Disadvantaged Children over a decade ago. Many of her students lived in the houses nearby, which were washed down the hillside when the ground gave way. Classes have been suspended while the search goes on for the missing. For the survivors, it's a harrowing time.
This thing discourages us because we groom those people for the mere feature and then, unfortunately, they die.
Every Sunday, the school building is used as a church. But instead of the usual hundreds, barely 30 came after the devastation, struggling to come to terms with their sorrow.
The pastor also encouraged members to be patient, to love one another, that the hope has not gone, because we, at least some of us are alive. That means that there is hope.
Almost 500 people were killed by the mudslide and flooding that struck in the early hours of the 14th of August, and at least 600 are still listed as missing.
Well, despite international controversy, South Africa's first online auction of rhino horn opened on Wednesday. The 3-day sell-off began after a last-minute legal tussle pushed it back 2 days. Auctioneers didn't set an opening price for bids, but potential bidders needed to pay €100,000 just to register, and only registered bidders had access to the bidding process. The exercise has been organised by the owner of the world's largest rhino farm. He says that he's doing it for the good of the animals.
John Hume owns the largest rhino breeding farm in the world, home to 1,500 rhino. Each week he has their horns cut to discourage poachers. But with rhino horns highly prized in Asia, fetching more than gold or cocaine on the black market, he also has to spend €150,000 a month on security.
What I'm doing here is not sustainable for me. The cost is too huge. There is only one way that I will pay for this cost. That is to sell my rhino horn and to use that money to protect my rhino. So to me, the people who are stopping me from selling my rhino horn and protecting my rhino may as well be joined with the poachers, because they will kill my rhino.
John Hume won a series of court battles earlier this year to overturn the 8-year ban on the domestic sale of rhino horns. He's now launched a website to hold a 3-day auction of horns, which bidders can access in Chinese and Vietnamese. But the auction has raised concerns that it could boost the black market and undermine a 4-decade-old international ban on rhino trading.
John Hume's agenda is about profit, and he's exacerbated the loopholes that we have in our law to trade and farm in rhinos. Our rhinos should be protected rather than farmed, commodified and, traded. It's absolutely outrageous.
South Africa is home to around 20,000 rhino, some 80% of the worldwide population. But the species is in danger of disappearing, with more than 1,000 rhino killed in the country every year.
That's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.